There is a statistic the retirement industry does not advertise. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, only 2% of American households have $2 million or more saved in retirement accounts. 2%, which means 98% do not. And $2 million using the 4% withdrawal rule generates $80,000 per year. A number most financial planners consider the floor for a comfortable retirement in 2026, not the ceiling. But here is what makes that statistic genuinely alarming. Most of that 98% are not people who never tried. They are people who did what they were told. They contributed to their 401k. They bought index funds. They stayed invested through downturns. And they are still going to run out of money, not because the advice was wrong, because the advice was incomplete, because nobody told them about the 5 specific mechanisms that silently drain retirement accounts over 20 to 30 years. Mechanisms that work against you even when you do everything else right. My name is Ben. I have spent years going through Federal Reserve surveys, actuarial studies, and Social Security Administration reports trying to understand not just how many people run out of money in retirement, but why. The answer is not bad investments. It is not stock market crashes. It is 5 quiet structural forces that compound against you over time and that almost no retirement plan accounts for completely. By the end of this video, you will understand all 5 forces, why they are invisible until it is too late to reverse them, and what the 2% who do not run out of money do differently. Because the gap between the 2% and the 98% is not primarily a savings gap. It is a planning gap. Here is the metaphor. You are rowing a boat across a wide lake. You can see the other shore. You have calculated exactly how much water you need for the journey. You start rowing. What you did not account for is the current. Not dramatic, no rapids, no visible turbulence. Just a slow, steady push perpendicular to your path. You row hard, you make progress. But by the time you reach the other side, you have drifted 3 miles from where you intended to land. That is what happens to the 98%. They row hard for 35 years. They arrive somewhere. Just not where they planned. The first force is longevity risk. The average American who reaches 65 today has a 50% chance of living past 85 and a meaningful chance of living past 90. A couple where both partners are 65 has roughly a 50% chance that at least one of them lives past 90. A 25-year retirement is not a worst-case scenario. For many people, it is the median case. But most retirement plans model 20 to 25 years. The people who plan for 25 years and live 32 do not run out of money because they failed at investing. They run out because they planned for a shorter life than they lived. The 2% plan for the longest plausible scenario. They build income architecture to survive a 35-year retirement because if it survives 35 years and they only need 25, they lose nothing. If it survives 25 years and they need 35, they lose everything. The second force is healthcare cost acceleration. Healthcare inflation runs at roughly double the general inflation rate. A retiree spending $12 per year on healthcare at 65 will spend approximately $22,000 per year at 80 if their health stays constant. Most retirement plans apply one flat inflation rate to the entire budget. The result is a plan that looks balanced on paper and runs short in practice because the most expensive category was given the wrong growth rate. The 2% model healthcare separately with its own inflation assumption and build a specific reserve for one major adverse health event. The third force is sequence of returns risk. If you retire at 65 and the market drops 35% in your first 2 years, you are selling shares at their lowest price to fund living expenses. You are locking in those losses permanently. Even if the market fully recovers 3 years later, you own fewer shares than you would have if you had not been forced to sell at the bottom. Studies show that two people with identical portfolios, identical withdrawal rates, and identical average returns over 30 years can have dramatically different outcomes, one running out of money, one dying with millions, based solely on whether the bad years came early or late in retirement. The 2% build structures that prevent forced selling during downturns. Cash buckets, guaranteed income floors, dividend income that does not require selling shares. The fourth force is tax drag in the distribution phase. Every dollar withdrawn from a traditional 401k or IRA is taxed as ordinary income. Required minimum distributions force increasing withdrawals as you age, often pushing retirees into higher tax brackets than planned. Social Security benefits become partially taxable above income thresholds that have not been adjusted for inflation in over 40 years, meaning more retirees cross those thresholds every year without any change in real purchasing power. The 2% manage tax exposure in the distribution phase as actively as they did during accumulation. Roth conversions in early retirement. Strategic income sequencing to stay below Social Security taxation thresholds. Qualified charitable distributions to satisfy RMDs without triggering taxable income. The fifth force is the spending pattern mismatch. Most retirement plans assume relatively flat spending over the full retirement period. The reality is a U-shaped curve. Spending is highest in early retirement when retirees are active and traveling. It dips in the middle years as activity slows. Then it rises sharply again in the final years as healthcare and long-term care costs dominate. A plan built on average spending misses both peaks. The 2% build phase-specific budgets. Higher discretionary spending in their 60s and early 70s, reduced lifestyle spending in the mid-years, and a specific healthcare reserve for the final phase. They do not average the whole thing and hope it balances out. Here is the thread connecting all five forces. Each one is invisible in the short term. Longevity risk does not feel urgent at 65. Healthcare cost acceleration does not feel significant in year 3. Sequence of returns risk only reveals itself after it has already done its damage. Tax drag surprises people on their first retirement tax return. Spending pattern mismatch only becomes obvious when late life healthcare bills arrive and the account cannot cover them. These forces do not announce themselves. They compound quietly for years before the gap becomes visible. And by the time it is visible, the options for closing it have mostly expired. The 2% are not smarter. They do not have dramatically higher incomes or better stock picks. What they have is a plan that accounts for all five forces. They plan for the longest plausible life. They model healthcare separately with honest inflation assumptions. They build income structures that prevent forced selling during downturns. They manage tax exposure actively in the distribution phase. And they budget for a U-shaped spending curve rather than a flat line. The 98% are not failing because they did not save enough, though many did not. They are failing because the plan they built does not account for how retirement actually works over 30 years. You now understand the five forces the plan needs to address. What you do with that understanding is the only thing that separates where you are from where you want to be.